I moved to a quiet suburb a few months ago. I was 32 and looking for some peace after my breakup. At first, everything felt normal. I set up my home office with a nice view of the street. Late nights became my routine. The silence was comforting. But on the third night, I noticed him. I glanced up from my computer and saw my neighbor, standing still at his window. He was across the street, barely moving. My heart sank. It felt wrong. I thought maybe he was just a night owl like me, but the unease lingered. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. Each night, I worked late, and he was there. I saw him leaning against the window frame. Sometimes it seemed as if he was staring right at me. Other times, I wasn't so sure. I heard odd noises through my walls, whispers and muffled conversations. I questioned if they were real or just my tired mind playing tricks. Weeks passed. Odd things happened next door. I caught glimpses of dark figures moving behind the curtains. They shifted in ways that didn't seem natural. I found myself peeking through my own curtains, heart racing. Every time, he was there, watching. It felt like I was stuck in a horror movie, waiting for something to go wrong. One night, I finally built the courage to confront him. I needed to break the awkwardness. I walked to my front door and knocked next door. I waited. Silence stretched on, making my heart beat louder. After a long pause, I knocked again. Still nothing. A chill crept over me. The quiet felt heavy. I returned to my house, unsettled. That night I heard him again. Low tones filtered through the walls. I couldn't understand any words. My gut twisted. What was he talking about? I started feeling trapped in my home. Was he troubled? Or was it something darker that made him watch me? Sleep became tricky. I was constantly on edge. Then came the night it peaked. I glanced out my window again, heart racing. He was there, staring at me. The streetlight barely lit his face, but I could see him clearly. I felt cold all over, not knowing how to react. Should I wave? I didn't. Instead, I turned away, feeling dread in my gut. Then I heard his voice. Why are you always working so late? It sent chills down my spine. Who asked that? I felt paralyzed as I backed away from the window. I knew I had to avoid him. Then I heard a knock at my door. I froze. I didn't expect anyone. My heart raced again as I opened the door. There was nobody there. Just empty darkness. I never stopped thinking about it. Why did he watch me? What did he want? I still live in that house, staring out my window each night, waiting for him to return. But he never does. The days blurred together. I found myself counting the nights since my last encounter with him. I thought I'd feel relief without his presence, but instead, I experienced an uneasy calm. Something was still wrong. I buried myself in work, hoping to drown out my anxiety. But I couldn't concentrate. I would glance at the window often, expecting to see him. Each time felt like a small jolt to my stomach. Why did I miss him? One Saturday morning, I decided to take a break from my computer. I needed fresh air. I felt restless. I walked outside to the small patch of grass in my yard. The sun felt good on my skin, but every time I turned my head, I was searching for shadows behind curtains across the street. Then, I noticed the porch light of his house was on for the first time. Curiosity pulled me in. I took a few careful steps towards the fence. The light flickered, casting a strangely inviting glow. I felt drawn to it, despite everything swirling in my mind. I walked closer and realized his front door was slightly ajar. A crack of darkness loomed behind it. I hesitated. This felt wrong. But then I heard a noise, a soft thud and a muffled voice. Help me, it whispered. It was eerie and desperate. My breath caught in my throat. What is happening? I murmured to myself, unsure if I should move forward. I cast a glance towards my own house. No one was watching me. I stepped closer. I stood at the edge of his porch, heart pounding. The porch creaked beneath my weight. I felt the weight of the quiet, like fingers wrapping around my throat. "Is someone there?" I called out, trying to sound brave. The only answer was the silence, thick and suffocating. I mustered the courage to push the door open farther. It creaked loudly as I peered inside. The living room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners. I shouted again, "Hello?" My voice echoed back to me, eerie and hollow. Just as I was about to step inside, I noticed something on the ground, a small notebook lying open, its pages fluttering like a trapped animal. I bent down, heart racing, and could barely make out phrases scrawled across the page. "She sees me. I must watch. She can't know." I jerked back, fear coursing through me. Were these his thoughts? It felt too personal, too invasive. But I had to know more. I stretched my arm towards the notebook when suddenly, a noise erupted from deep within the house, a loud crash followed by a frantic scramble. I froze in place. Then I heard footsteps, heavy and uncertain. Someone was coming. I backed away, heart racing. I couldn't stay. I turned and ran, scrambling back across the yard towards my safety. As I reached my front door, I dared one last glance back. The door was now wide open. The light flickered ominously, but all I could see was darkness beyond it. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. That night sleep eluded me. My mind raced with questions. Who was he? What was happening in that house? Then came the realization. I had crossed a line. Now, there was no turning back. The next day felt heavier than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. I sat in front of my computer, but no words would come. Instead, I kept replaying the previous night in my mind, the notebook, the muffled voice, the door ajar. It felt like I was living in a horror movie, and I was the unwilling star. Finally, the hours crawled by, and I decided I had to know what was going on next door. I tried to convince myself that it was curiosity, not fear, that drove me. I took a deep breath and walked outside. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I glanced at his house. It looked the same as always, no signs of life. With hesitation, I approached the porch again. The light was off now, and the door stood closed. Something inside me screamed to flee, but I took another step. I reached the door, heart pounding. I pressed my ear against it, straining to hear anything. Silence. I felt foolish standing there, but I had to know. I slowly turned the knob. It clicked, and the door swung open with a soft creak. I stepped inside, my breath hitching as the familiar shadows greeted me. Inside was even darker than the last time, and I felt like an intruder. I took a cautious step forward. The air was stale, carrying faint whispers of something unsettling. I noticed the notebook still lay on the floor, open to the same pages I had seen before. My curiosity wrestled with my fear. I picked it up with trembling hands, glancing around for any sign of movement. Flipping through the pages, I found more rushed notes. "I have to watch her, she can't escape, time is running out." Each phrase made my skin crawl. That S when I saw it. Beneath the last note, a name, Clara. Not just a name, it felt like a warning. My mind raced. Was that me? I hadn't told anyone my name, not even him. So who had he been communicating with? Just then, a faint sound broke the stillness, a scratching at the back of the house. My heart stopped. Someone was in the house. I quickly shoved the notebook under my arm and turned to leave when I heard it again, louder. Panic surged through me. I felt trapped. I dashed towards the door, but it suddenly slammed shut by itself. I whipped around, eyes wide. Footsteps echoed from the hall, heavy and deliberate. "Clara," a voice called softly. It wasn't his. I froze. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaking. Silence fell. Then came the sound of breathing, deep and ragged. I gripped the notebook tighter, willing myself to move. I pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation clawed at me. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. I felt a presence right behind me. I turned slowly, my stomach in knots. I was not alone. And that S when everything went dark. Light flooded my vision as I blinked back into consciousness. I lay on the floor, disoriented. The notebook had fallen from my grip, landing a few feet away. My mind raced. What had happened? I sat up slowly, scanning my surroundings. The house was still dark, and silence enveloped me like a shroud. I felt a pit of dread in my stomach. Had I lost consciousness? If so, for how long? I had to get out. Using the wall for support, I stood and searched for the door. It was closed, but I felt the cold metal handle beneath my fingers. I turned it and pushed. It swung open. I blinked at the sudden brightness. I stumbled into a hallway. The corridor stretched into darkness, but light poured in from the front of the house. I stepped cautiously toward it. Just as I reached the threshold, I spotted something on the floor, a small, crumpled piece of paper. Nervously, I picked it up. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. There were no words, only a crude drawing, a figure behind a window, watching, eyes wide, mouth twisted in a grin. My breath quickened. It wasn't just a doodle, it felt like a threat. Equating it to the name in the notebook sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a floorboard creak behind me, and I spun around. No one was there. I scanned the darkness, and the uncertainty knotted my stomach. I had to get out. With my heart pounding, I dashed toward the front door. It felt like a maze as I navigated through the shadows. As I ran, chills raced down my spine, wondering if someone or something might be following me. I flung open the door and burst outside, gasping for air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. I looked around, half expecting to see someone lurking. But there was nothing, just the empty street. I ran toward my house, but a sound stopped me dead in my tracks, a soft whimper. It came from the porch next door. I hesitated, my mind reeling. Should I go back? The last time I had, it had nearly cost me everything. But what if someone was in trouble? I took a step forward, my instincts screaming at me to run. But curiosity against my better judgment pulled at me. I approached, the sound growing clearer. Help, it said, barely above a whisper. I paused, heart racing. Who was it? Was it him? Hello? I called out, stepping onto the porch. The noise stopped. I felt every nerve in my body tighten with fear. Please help, the voice broke the silence again, softer this time. It didn't sound threatening, but I couldn't shake the name from my mind. Clara. Was this some cruel game? I hesitated, darkness creeping back into the corners of my thoughts. My instincts fought against my curiosity. But I had no choice. I needed to know what connecting threads wove this terrifying tapestry together. Then I heard a door creaking open inside the house behind me, followed by footsteps. I wasn't alone. I didn't want to turn around, but I knew I had to. The footsteps grew louder, and dread pulled in my stomach. Whoever was inside that house could be coming for me. The whimpering persisted, a desperate plea echoing in the stillness, but I felt torn. With a shaky breath, I forced myself to look back. The door stood ajar, ominously swaying with the breeze. I searched for a glimpse of movement within. Shadows danced on the walls, but there was no one in sight. My heart raced faster. Should I run? I felt like prey, cornered and vulnerable. Please help, the voice called again. This time, it sounded weaker, almost defeated. I swallowed hard. What happened? Who's there? I asked, my voice trembling. Clara, I'm trapped, she said, her words tinged with urgency. The name triggered something deep within me. I had seen Clara's name in that notebook, the same book filled with confusion and fear. I couldn't just walk away. I took a step toward the door, but dread coiled tighter around me. Was this a trap? As I hesitated, the footsteps stopped. I turned, trying to assess my surroundings, when I noticed something glimmering in the grass. It was just a small, round object, but it caught the light just enough to pull me in. I glanced back at the door. No one had emerged yet. I dashed to the object. It was a key. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I picked it up, its surface smooth and familiar. I felt as if it were meant for something important, but what? Could it belong to Clara's house? Or was it more foreboding than I realized? Help! Clara sounded more desperate now, echoing in a hollow tone that made me uneasy. I looked back at her porch. It wasn't just my mind racing. I felt the weight of her distress. But before I could move, a shadow shifted behind the door of my neighbor's house. I froze, my breath hitching. There was someone there. Someone watching. I caught a glimpse of a figure, tall and still, just beyond the threshold. Was it him? A creeping realization settled over me. I had to make a choice. I stood there, both parts of me screaming, one to run, the other to save. The decision felt monumental, though it was just a few steps away. I couldn't ignore Clara, yet every instinct told me to flee. Then the front door creaked wide open. I felt the air shift behind me, heavy and thick. Someone was standing there. I was out of time. Just as I turned back toward Clara, a chill swept over me. I had to act fast. Would I use the key? Would it unlock more than just a door? That's when I heard the unmistakable click of a lighter, igniting the darkness behind me. My heart sank as I realized I had just stepped into a trap. I felt the heat rise behind me, the flame flickering like a predator's eye. My instincts screamed at me to run, but just as I turned to flee, I caught sight of the figure stepping into the light. It was him, my neighbor, the one I had tried to avoid. His face was shadowed, but I could see a sinister smile curling at the corners of his lips. "You shouldn't have come here, Clara," he said, his voice low and chilling. "I'm not Clara," I shouted, panic lacing my words. "Let me go." He took a step closer, and I could see the gleam of a knife in his hand. My heart raced as I darted for the cover of the trees lining the yard. I couldn't stay here. Clara needed me, but I was the one in danger now. "Run all you want. I'll find you," he called after me, his laughter echoing as I zigzagged through the underbrush. Each branch that snapped drew me closer to hysteria. I had to think. I grasped the key tightly, the metal cold against my palm, a lifeline. I remembered Clara's voice. "I'm trapped." Was there a way to help her? I had to stop running and regroup. I scanned the porch as I reached the edge of the yard, the door still ajar. There was potential inside. Maybe I could find something that would help us both. The moment I slipped back toward the house, my blood thundered in my ears. The door creaked open wider, as if beckoning me in. I pushed aside my fear and sprinted up the steps. In that instant, I felt the warmth of the flame linger behind me still too close. I threw the door open, stepping into the dim light. The air was stale and heavy, filled with the scent of something rotting. I glanced back. There was no sign of my neighbor. I didn't have much time. I turned my attention to the small living room. It was cluttered, shadows looming, but I wasn't sure what I was looking for. In one corner, a dusty bookshelf caught my eye, and on the wall beside it hung a strange assortment of keys jumbled and rusted. Could any of them belong to Clara? Just as I reached for a particularly old-looking key, I heard it again. Clara's whimper echoed from the back of the house, louder now. It was as if her voice had multiplied, filling the air. I dropped the key and rushed toward the sound, my heart pounding hard against my ribs. The hallway was dark, but I could see a light flickering at the end. I followed it, desperation propelling me forward. The door to the basement stood slightly ajar, the light spilling out in a flickering dance, as if something alive was waiting for me. I hesitated, fear gripping me. Was this where Clara was? That when I heard it, a faint scraping sound behind me, growing louder. I glanced back. The door to the living room was closed. A shape moved beyond it, and I realized I wasn't alone. The time to act was now. I couldn't let him catch up. I had to find Clara before it was too late. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light of the basement, not knowing what awaited me. The basement swallowed me in darkness, the flickering light revealing just enough. I hesitated at the top step, heart pounding. The faint sound of Clara's whimpering cut through the air, pulling me down. I clutched the wall for support, each step down feeling heavier, like the weight of dread chained to my feet. The light came from a bulb that hung overhead, its buzzing filling the silence. The basement was concrete and cold, littered with old furniture draped in white sheets. It felt like a graveyard for discarded memories. I stepped forward, trying to shake the unease creeping around me. "Clara?" I called, my voice shaking. "Where are you?" The whimpers grew louder, coming from the far corner. I approached cautiously, the anticipation tightening in my chest. But as I reached the end of the room, my stomach dropped. I saw her, or rather, what was left of her. Another shape lay crumpled on the floor, entangled in ropes. My breath caught in my throat. Clara's eyes were wide, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Help me!" she cried, her voice barely above a whisper. I rushed to her, my heart racing. "What happened?" I worked to unbind her hands, frantic. "How did you end up here?" "Your neighbor, he took me," she sobbed. I thought he was just watching, but he wanted more. Her voice trailed off, panic flashing across her face. I tried to stay calm as I peeled away the ropes. "He's coming for me too," I said, glancing back toward the basement door. "We need to go. Now." But just as I finished loosening her binds, the light above flickered wildly. Shadows danced along the walls, and I felt a gust of cold air brush past me, like a warning. "Did you hear that?" Clara's voice trembled. I turned, straining to listen. The scraping noise was back, but now it was louder, more deliberate. Someone was in the house. "Stay quiet," I hissed, grabbing her arm and pulling her close. My mind raced, calculating our next move. I spotted a window behind a stack of old couches. It was our only escape. "We can make it out there." Clara nodded, but before we could move, the basement door swung open with a loud creak, a silhouette filling the frame. My neighbor stood there, knife gleaming. His smile was wide and menacing. "Thought you could hide from me?" he taunted, stepping inside. I felt the world narrow around me, the walls closing in. I needed a plan, but my thoughts felt jumbled. "Clara, run!" I shouted, shoving her toward the window. Before she could leap, I dove toward the figure blocking our exit. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and I swung my fist, hoping to catch him off guard. But he was quicker. He dodged and grabbed my wrist instead, twisting it until I cried out in pain. "Pathetic," he growled, his breath hot against my face. "You should have stayed away." That's when I saw it, the glint of the light reflected on something shiny peeking out from the shadows behind him, a second knife, lying just within reach. My opportunity was fading, but I would fight for Clara. I had to. Before he could react, I yanked my wrist free and lunged for the knife. As my fingers closed around its handle, a sense of clarity swept over me. I wasn't going to let him win. But little did I know, the confrontation was only beginning. I gripped the knife tightly, feeling its cold metal against my palm. My neighbor stepped back, seeming surprised I had the nerve, but his stiff grin didn't fade. "You think that'll save you?" he taunted, lunging for me. I barely dodged to the side, my heart racing. Clara was still by the window, frozen in fear. "Clara, go!" I shouted again. She didn't move. The basement felt smaller and more suffocating as I stood between her and him. I pivoted back, ready to defend her. He advanced again, knife poised, and in one swift motion, I swung, the blade slicing through the air. He sidestepped, laughing. The sound echoed, chilling me further. "I've done this before," he said, taunting. I could see now the madness glimmering in his eyes. This was no random attack. He was fixated on us, and the thrill of the chase propelled him. In that moment of distraction, Clara finally broke free from her paralysis. She lunged for the window, desperate to escape. I could see hope in her eyes. But my neighbor noticed too, and quickly turned his attention back to her. "No!" I yelled, sprinting after Clara. I had to get her to safety. As I reached the window, I pushed the couch out of the way, and she scrambled up onto the sill. But then the world seemed to slow. I heard the scrape of the knife against concrete. He drew closer, and panic surged through me. I couldn't let him hurt her. I had to make a choice. I grabbed the nearest furniture, an old wooden chair, and swung it directly at him. It splintered on impact, and he stumbled back, thrown off balance. I seized the opportunity. "Clara, jump!" I urged. She hesitated, glancing back at me. "What about you? Just go. I'll hold him off," I pleaded. With a deep breath, she leaped through the window, landing on the grass outside. I wanted to follow, but I couldn't let him near her. He regained his balance, rage boiling over as he glared at me, the glint of his knife sharper than ever. "Now you're going to pay," he growled, stepping forward with a determined stride. I backed away instinctively, my heart pounding in my chest. Just then, I heard a loud crash from above, what sounded like footsteps racing down the hallway. I froze, confusion flooding me. Who else was in the house? Before I could think, a different shadow emerged at the mouth of the basement. It was a stranger, tall and imposing, with an unfamiliar face wrapped in shadows. "Get away from them!" the voice boomed, sending a jolt of confusion through me. My neighbor seemed to hesitate, watching the newcomer with a mix of intrigue and caution. It was just what I needed. I glanced back at Clara, who was standing outside, eyes wide as she searched for an opening to come back for me. With the element of surprise on my side, I took my chance. "Run!" I shouted to Clara, my focus now on the man confronting my neighbor. Everything had changed in an instant, and I struggled to comprehend the new threat. I was no longer fighting just for myself and Clara. Now, there was someone else involved. As I prepared to defend our escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were secrets here that went deeper than I realized. What had my neighbor been planning all along? And who was this stranger that had shown up just in time? I needed answers, but right now, survival was my priority. The newcomer took a step forward, blocking my view of my neighbor. My pulse quickened. I had no idea who he was, but he looked fierce and determined. "What are you doing here?" I shouted over my shoulder, not taking my eyes off the two men facing off. "They're in danger," he said, his voice low and steady. He gestured with his chin toward my neighbor. "That man has been stalking you. I've been trying to keep you safe." "Stalking?" My stomach dropped. I had sensed something was off, but I had never considered it could be this serious. My mind raced back to nights when I'd caught glimpses of him staring out from his window, watching. The memories twisted in my gut like a knife. My neighbor's expression soured. "You don't know what you're getting into, stranger," he hissed. "This is personal." The tension in the room crackled. I had to do something. "Clara!" I called out, trying to coax her back inside, but she stood rooted in place, fear etched on her face. Then I noticed the man's eyes narrow with focus. I followed his gaze just in time to see my neighbor move, charging at us with the knife. "Get back!" I yelled to Clara as I lunged toward the stranger, ready to defend my flank. The two collided. There was a loud crash, and the stranger grabbed my neighbor's wrist, twisting it until the knife fell to the ground. My heart skipped. This was my chance. "Clara, now!" I shouted, urging her to come closer. "Help me!" But before she could respond, the unexpected happened. The stranger, holding my neighbor against the wall, looked at me with a mix of urgency and concern. "We need to get out of here now," he said, his grip not faltering. As they wrestled, I felt a surge of anger and fear. "Let him go!" I yelled, clenching my fists. This stranger might have saved me, but I didn't trust him fully. I was torn between helping him and protecting Clara. The neighbor let out a twisted laugh. "You think you can escape? You have no idea who you're dealing with." He struggled against the stranger's grasp, but it was clear that he was losing. "Enough!" the stranger finally shouted, throwing the neighbor aside with strength that shocked me. He turned to me, seriousness etched in his features. "We need to move. I can explain everything later." I glanced back at Clara, who finally seemed to thaw from her shock. What about him? She asked, voice trembling. I won't let him hurt you, the stranger assured, crouching to pick up the fallen knife. But we can't linger here. I felt a swirl of panic. This was all happening so fast. Who are you? I demanded. And why are you helping us? But before he could answer, a loud bang echoed through the basement. The door upstairs burst open, and a second shadow appeared, another man, looming and menacing. We need to go. Now, the first stranger urged, his gaze darting between us and the new intruder. In that split second, I had a choice to make. My heart raced as the reality settled in. Danger was closing in from all sides. I could run with Clara and the stranger or stay and fight. But with a second threat emerging, it didn't feel like I had any time left to decide. Stay close, I shouted to Clara, and together, we moved toward the basement stairs. But the shadows were growing darker, and I knew that this night was only just beginning. I stumbled up the stairs, Clara close behind me, the stranger not far off as we darted through the dim basement and into the house. The air was thick and saturated with the musty smell of stale memories, stuffed furniture draped in white sheets, forgotten signs of a life once lived. I could feel the shadows whispering in the corners, urging me to flee. Just as we reached the top of the stairs, I heard the basement door crash open behind us. Don't stop! The stranger yelled, his voice sharp and urgent. We sprinted into the living room, where the flickering lights overhead cast a warped glow around us. I glanced back and caught a glimpse of my neighbor's intense gaze cutting through the darkness, a sinister smile still stretching across his lips. Leave her alone! I shouted, trying to keep as much confidence in my voice as I could muster. But my heart raced, thrumming in my chest as we burst through the front door and onto the porch, the cool evening air rushing to meet us. Where do we go? Clara's voice was barely audible, tinged with panic. I could sense her fear matching the churning unease in my gut. We need to reach the street, the stranger urged, his eyes darting around. We have to get away from this place. Trust me. With the darkness growing deeper around us, we bolted from the porch, stepping into the overgrown yard. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that twisted and danced across the pavement. My neighbor's laughter rang out behind us, echoing in the night like an omen. We ran, the sound of footsteps pounding on the wooden floors behind us made my heart pound harder. Just as we reached the road ahead, I dared a glance over my shoulder. My neighbor stood silhouetted against the doorway, a haunting figure against the light, but he didn't follow. Why isn't he coming after us? Clara asked, glancing back too but not slowing her pace. There's something he's hiding, the stranger replied breathlessly. Something we still need to uncover. We reached the edge of the neighborhood, and I finally had to stop, my lungs burning as I leaned against the lamppost, gasping for breath. Who are you? I demanded, turning to the stranger. What do you know about him? I can't explain everything right now, he said, scanning the empty street. But I've been watching him for a while. He's dangerous. He watches people, but it's more than just fascination. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. What does he want? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Before the stranger could answer, a sound behind us made all our hearts drop. A soft scratching, like fingernails on glass, pierced the night. We turned slowly, and for a moment, it felt as if the air thickened, the street grew quieter, the world holding its breath. The door that led into my neighbor's house creaked open again, and we all froze. What loomed in that threshold was worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. Shadowy figures poured out one after another, their shapes indistinct yet disquietingly human. They stood in the doorway, flickering in and out of view, eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. Now do you see? The stranger breathed, stepping back. He's not just sick, he has something darker bound to him. Those figures, they're what he feeds on. What does that mean? I murmured, stepping closer to Clara, feeling her shiver against me. It means we're out of time. The stranger's eyes widened, looking past me toward the figures who were now beginning to drift out toward the street, their numbers growing by the second. We need to go now. Without considering the consequences, I bolted, grabbing Clara's hand and pulling her along with me as the unknown horror came closer, their whispers mingling with the wind. The stranger joined us, and we tore down the street, hearts racing. An instinct kicked in, compelling us to keep moving away from the darkness, away from that house, and perhaps, away from any chance of ever finding closure. But as we ran, a chill crept into my thoughts. My neighbor had vanished, but what was I running from? Was it just him, or something more? Supernatural? The shadows seemed to sulk along the edges of my vision, twisting their way further into my mind. We crossed into a neighboring street, finally slowing down to catch our breath beneath the glow of a distant streetlight. The figures were gone. Rain clouds seemed to gather above, blocking out the moonlight. We need to keep moving, the stranger urged again, but I could see Clara trembling, her face pale with the terror of what we'd just witnessed. Wait, I gasped, forcing words out through deep breaths. What happens now? We can't just keep running forever. The stranger looked at us, and there was a brief flicker of something in his eyes, a moment of hesitation. This is just the beginning. He has a hold on you, Clara. What do you mean? She asked, her eyes wide. Didn't he do anything? We can't let him find us again, the stranger insisted, voice serious. It's deeper than you think, something dark that comes from his obsession. But we need to investigate further. We can stop him. I could feel Clara's hand tighten in mine, but I wasn't so sure. The lingering sense of dread had settled in my gut. Would pursuing this darkness lead us to more danger? I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to make it all stop. But as I glanced back at the shadows gathering on the edges of the street, faint echoes of something that felt far more complex than simple human malice, I understood that some answers lay ahead, shrouded in the uncertainty that would forever entwine our fates.